Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The Force is not a monolithic entity, and the Sith and Jedi do not have a monopoly over its definition and who can access it. The Force has many different names in many different languages. Throughout Star Wars history, most of the center of the galaxy was pretty well connected. But the unknown region was a complete mystery. This was partly because this area of space was saturated with nebulas, wandering black holes, and other gravitational anomalies that made it very difficult for hyperspace travel. However, life still found a way in these regions of space, and one of the most important groups of people in the unknown region, or chaos as it was called, was the Chiss Ascendancy. This was a highly advanced and disciplined near-human civilization. Their culture and technology developed independently from the rest of the galaxy, and so their understanding of the Force was also a bit different as well. Because of the shifting nature of space surrounding the Chiss Ascendancy, well-established hyperspace lanes like the ones you see in the rest of the galaxy were very uncommon in the unknown region. Instead, the Chiss had to use Force users to guide their ships through hyperspace like people used to do back in the Old Republic era. Now, in Chiss culture, the Force is known as the Sight. For some reason, only females were randomly gifted with this rare ability, and as they grew older, this ability would eventually disappear. This is very different from how other species have the Force, and this kind of falls into my theory that the Chiss were most likely genetically created for deep space travel. This is probably one of the side effects of their genetic alteration. Anyway, these young girls once found by the Chiss Ascendancy would be conscripted into the fleet as Ozli Esenhembo, or the Chinoo word for Skywalker, which is kind of cool. Now, these girls and the Chiss's connection to the Force was a highly guarded strategic secret that very few outside of the Chiss Ascendancy actually knew about. The Chiss were very strategic and careful about revealing any information about themselves to the various degenerate xenospecies that inhabited the chaos. And so the Chiss would mainly rely on Force-sensitive Xenos from the Pathfinding Guild to guide their ship, as would many other species in this part of the galaxy. Now, Skywalkers were very rare in Chiss society, and they lacked the same training program and structure that the Jedi and Sith would create in their own societies. Most Skywalkers only had two powers. There was Second Sight, which was telepathy, and Third Sight, which was precognition, and that was used to guide ships safely through hyperspace. We don't hear any mentioning in canon of Chiss doing anything else with the Force like telekinesis. This could be a limitation due to the Chiss's genetic makeup, or it could be because they have a lack of training available to basically teach these young individuals how to use the full potential of the Force. On one occasion, the Chiss ran into an unidentified group of refugees who were led by a matriarch known as the Maggies. The Civil War had been orchestrated on their homeworld, and it had destroyed most of the civilization on the planet. This matriarch wanted what was left of her people to commit ritual suicide together. This wasn't out of despair, but so that they could pass into what was known as the Beyond in order to heal the world they left behind. The Beyond, of course, is a reference to the cosmic Force, and this matriarch was even able to sense which Chiss had Force sensitivity as well. Several planets in the galaxy are known to be powerful in the Force. One of these planets was Dathomir. It was bathed in dark side energy and home to the matriarchal society known as the Night Sisters. We're unsure of how they first came to be, but apparently one legend says that the first Night Sisters were trained in the ways of the Force by a female Jedi that had been sent there in exile. No matter what the origins were, the Night Sisters were mostly Force sensitive, but relatively weak compared to most Jedi and Sith fighters. But the planet itself was full of magical ichor, which could be used to increase the strength and durability of the Night Sisters, and could even rebuild the limbs of wounded individuals and remove mental illness from their mind. Matriarchs like Mother Talzin were able to use these magical ichors to fight even more powerful Sith Lords and keep them at bay for some time. The older Night Sisters were extremely talented with the ichor and could do interesting things with it, like make individuals invisible or even resurrect the fallen as undead guardians. These powers are obviously aligned with Sith or Force alchemy. This was a school of Force knowledge that was lost a long time ago. Because of the potent magical ichor found on Dathomir, Night Sisters tended to stay on their planets and rarely ventured to other systems. Long before the fall of the Jedi, Grandmaster Yoda felt the pull of the Force call him to a mysterious planet which had a large blue mountain made up of rocks that were alive in the Force. The local inhabitants had become greedy and started fighting over the mountain. The rocks that had come from it could be used as weapons and also gave individuals special powers. Ultimately, one group won control of the mountain while the others were banished to the Mudfields. Grandmaster Yoda runs into a bunch of these mud people first. They're all extremely young and terrified of outsiders. Their own stockpile of blue rocks, which they gathered when they left the mountain, was running low, and they fear they'll be massacred by the rock hawkers from the mountain. Grandmaster Yoda tries to go to the mountain to make peace with these rock hawkers and finds just another group of young individuals, who are far more militant. They capture Grandmaster Yoda and force him inside of the mountain in order to find its heart. While inside of the mountain, Yoda finds the parents of these children. They had gone into hiding and were tired of all the fighting on the surface. The Grandmaster ventures even deeper into the mountain and finds what looks like an actual heart made out of stone. Quickly, Yoda realizes that this mountain was actually an enormous organism, a stone giant. Using the Force, Yoda meditates for several days, slowly waking up the mountain. Before the Jedi, we had the Jedi Order, an ancient organization unified and brought together from various planets by a mysterious force to the world of Tython, deep in the galaxy's core and isolated from the rest of the galaxy. The Jedi believed that true balance between the dark and light side of the Force was only achievable within oneself. The idea was understanding both sides of the Force and what their uses were, and never letting one override the other. The planet of Tython had two different moons, Ashla and Bogan. Ashla was worshipped as a representation of the light side, whereas Bogan was a physical representation of the dark side. Both moons were home to powerful Force nexuses. When a Jedi became infatuated with one side of the Force, they would be sent on a retreat to one of the moons to balance things out through meditation and exposure to the opposite side of the Force. Before a schism occurred that would lead to the first separation of dark side and light side Force users, the Jedi had mastered many ancient schools of Force powers that would unfortunately be lost by modern times. This included creating life from the Force itself and creating flesh to replace wounds or lost limbs. This was a time period where there was no fear in the Force, only curiosity. As a matter of fact, the only thing the Jedi feared was extremism in how one approached the Force. The Rakan Infinite Empire was never supposed to have occurred. They were a primitive and ruthless species with dark side tendencies and affinity for cannibalism and torture. Unfortunately, another ancient species known as the Qua were sending their Force-sensitive missionaries across the galaxy via Infinity Gates and lifting up primitive species like Rakata by gifting them their knowledge of the Force and advanced technology. The Qua found out way too late that the Rakatans were a bloodthirsty and ambitious race. Soon after learning how to harness the Force, the Rakatans would turn against the Qua and build massive armies and fleets to take over much of the galaxy. They even created an enormous space station known as the Starforge. It was essentially a giant 3D printer that could copy any design and make millions of them. All of this technology, surprisingly, was powered and controlled through the Force itself. Now, there aren't many records or artifacts from this period of Rakan Infinite Empire history, so we're not exactly sure how their technology worked. A disaster would eventually strike the Rakatans in the form of a plague, which disconnected them from the Force, which meant that all of a sudden their technology ceased working as well. Within a generation, the Rakan Empire had been completely disconnected from the Force, and the species fell back to their primitive ways. The Misweavers were an ancient mystical order that worshipped the luminous mist, or Force as everyone else knows it. They could alter the mist to create glowing paintings and letters in the physical realm. They were also able to spin the strings of the Force into strong and resilient silk strands. The Misweavers were able to create self-healing barriers out of these Force strings, and they were even able to cocoon themselves inside of these barriers in order to slow time and space around them. So there you have it, guys, 7 different groups of individuals who had a very unique and different approach to the Force. This is just a great reminder that the Jedi and the Sith weren't the only ones using this mystical power. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.